Right. So let's talk about the Symfony workflow. First, who am I? Um, People say that I'm a Symfony lover, but well, this is true. I had the pleasure to be on 3 Symfony conferences as a speaker. The last one was in 2023 in Brussels. This picture is from my first Symfony conference as a speaker with One Brazil in 2019. And well, the agenda is what is the process and the Symfony workflow, how to use the Symfony workflow, the difference between the workflow and the state machine, a real case scenario, and generating graphs automatically. So first of all, to understand the workflow, we need to understand what is a process. There is a definition on the PHP book, which is a set of interrelated actions and activities performed to achieve a specified set of products, results, or services. So trying to translate this on a hands-on action, how to get to the PHP Meetup. This is a process. No? So first of all, I know that some of you also are coming from work, but let's suppose that first of all you get out from your home today, of course, and then you get a transport, and then you arrive in this event avenue, and then you select your room. Well, you came here in the Tech Meetup space, and then you start to listen to the talk. So what is the Symfony workflow? The Symfony workflow is just a model of a process in the application. So it consists of places and actions to get from one place to another. So in that example, you are coming from your home to the Meetup space. So it's you are getting from one place to another. And it has some terminologies. So first, the place, it's a step or stage in the process. The transition, which is the action of getting from one place to another, so specifically the action. The definition, which is a set of places and transactions. The marking, which is the current state position. We are very similar to a pointer. And the marking store, where is a place to store all the states. So here, for example, we have the init state, and then you have the transition start. You have a place that goes through the transition to, which means some action going to the place B, and then some action going to the place 3. Sorry. And this again, now having the same example, but applying the Symfony workflow terminology. When you are getting for your home, you are in a place, then you get a transport, which means a transition, to another place, which is the event venue. Then you select the room, which is another action, so a new transition. And then you go to the place. Then you have the marking here, if you look on the right corner, which means the place where you are now, so just a pointer. And you have the definition, which is all of these, like all the set. So how to install and configure the component in our application. So as every Symfony component is very easy, it's just using the composer requires, the Symfony workflow. How to find the Symfony workflow service class in the project. It's also a standard on Symfony. So you just use the debug auto-wiring. The pipe grep workflow is just to filter by this component, the workflow. So the result will be this line here on the bottom. And we have some options on the configurations. And to know all these configuration options, you have this command, which is the config dump reference, the framework workflows. The config dump reference is something that is also standard for Symfony. For every component, you can do that. And as the result here is too large, I just created a video. I don't know if you can see the text typing there. But I'm typing here all the command, the config dump reference, framework workflow, and then this is the result. As you can see, it's very large. But here you have all the transitions, you have the marking store, you have the markings, and all the steps and the states defined on the workflow component. Right, but what's the difference between the workflow versus the state machine? Well, this difference is very simple. Basically, the difference is that the workflow can be, well, we can have a state in workflow that belongs to more than one place at the same time. So this is called the multiple state. And the state machine uses just a single state terminology, which means that a state can be only in a single place per time. And to apply a transition, the workflow requires that the object is in all the previous place on the transition. And to apply the transition and to a state machine, you just need to be in one previous place, or the initial place. So if you get the Symfony workflow component and you dig the code, you find this interface. It is the base of the workflow. So here we have the marking store interface with a method, so the get marking. This one is just to find where is the current status or the current pointer, the state on the workflow. And you have the set marking, which is the action to set the new state. You have the marking store interface, which is also this one. For this one here, you can see the construct. And the main difference between the workflow and the state machine is this property called the single state here, which is false by default, because the full behavior is the workflow. So basically, the component is a workflow or multiple states by standard. And if it's true, it goes through the state machine, so it will create some validations and some blockings if you are using more than one state at the same time. And you have the get marking, which is the other method on the other interface, which just returns an array in case if it's a workflow, because you can have more than one state at the same time. And if you are using the state machine, you have a return as a string. So basically, there's two methods here there on this interface. You can translate this here. So this is an example. In this case, I'm creating a new class called sales order. And this sales order entity have the get current place, and if it's a workflow, it will return an array. And if it's a state machine, you return a string. So a new feature for the Symfony workflow from the Symfony 7, the newest version. The newest is the 7.2, but this event starts on the Symfony 7. So basically, to make the workflow more flexible, Symfony allows to create some events. And to create the events, you basically just need to have the event dispatcher in your class. You can do it by using the dependency injection or dependency inversion. So each step, you dispatch the following events. So every time that you are making a transaction, it will dispatch some events. That is for every workflow, or you can define for every workflow, or just for the workflow concerned, or just for the workflow concerned with the specific transition or place name. So this is the event. So we have the guard that validates whether the transition is blocked or not. The leave, when the subject is about to leave a place. The transition, that is just a validation when the subject is going through a new transition. The enter, when the subject is about to enter a new place. And enter it is after entering the new place. The completed, when the workflow is done, the transition is done. And the announce, just to trigger for each transition that now is accessible. And also we have this definition by default for all the events from the workflow. So you can use the workflow.the event name, or the workflow and the workflow name if you have the name for workflow, plus the event name, or the event name and the transition name. And also, starting from the PHP 8 and the PHP attributes, now you can use the attributes for the event listeners in the Symfony workflow. So here are just a list for these transitions, the attributes that you apply for listeners. And this is an example on how to apply these attributes. So here, for example, I have a class called article work, the article workflow for event listeners. And my attribute here is defined as transition listener. So it means that it's listening an event that will dispatch or trigger on every transition. But I can define on each workflow. So I have a named properties here. On the workflow, I have my workflow, for example, and the transition is published. So here I'm defining that this event you dispatch only when this article will be published. Here I'm using an example for the blocking transition. So here is a subscriber. When you are implementing an event subscriber, you need to do this for every component. You have the method that gets subscriber events when you have the events that you are listing. On this example, I am listening to the guard review. And on the guard review method, I'm just checking if this article has a title. And if it doesn't have a title, I will block this transition, and this is the message here. This blog post cannot be marked as reviewed because it has no title. And this is how to, another way to use the Symfony workflow is by YAML. So you have the YAML definition. So on the transitions, I have to review, which is a new state. And here I have the guard, which is the event. And on the guard, I have the is granted role reviewer, which means that I'm blocking this transition only for users that has the role. If the user is not a reviewer, I will block this transition because the user has no grant to do that. Also, you have a new feature, which is to disable the events. So now you have a third parameter here on the apply method. And this, we can specify which methods or which events you would like to disable. And you have constants here, all these constants on the bottom. And on this example, I'm just disabling the announce event. and also the leave event.
If you're exhausted before you even get to your desk, then check out T-Cube co-working space. Located at O'Connell Bridge in Dublin city centre means a maximum walk of just 3 minutes from over 100 Dublin bus routes, Dart Station and both Red and Green Lewis. And after a long day of code crunching, getting home or meeting friends for dinner is also a breeze. We offer a low-cost, no-frills model, which means you're not paying for free stuff that you'll never use. T-Cube offers a range of flexible daytime and 24/7 options, meaning you can join our community of freelance and remote software developers from as low as €277 per month. And that includes VAT, coffee and 1 gigabit Wi-Fi. So if you're looking for a distraction-free workspace, which you can come to and then get out again to enjoy your life in the comfort of knowing that you've been at your most productive, then get in touch today for a free trial. Call us on 675-9777 or find out more online at tcubedublin.com.
All right, so let's go for the real case scenario. This scenario here I will describe from my previous company on the Smartbox. And on this company, we had a project which is basically to handle sales orders. And well, this project had more than 22 valid status. Well, we have a member here on this project, so you can see there if it's right or if it's more. And also, we had more than 7 applications involved, and we had more than 5 different scenarios. And 2 of the main applications are using Symfony Workflow, and the whole company was using the Symfony. And so let's talk about the application. So this is the example of the flow, it's just not exactly like this, but it's just an example. So first, we had the sales order creation request. Then it goes to the order validation. Then goes to accepted, persists the order, sent to next application, or processing and complete. So getting this flow, the previous flow, and translating this to the Symfony Workflow terminology and configuration, we created this file. On this file, we can see that the sales order type is a state machine. So it means that it can only handle 1 state per time. The marking store, we have a type method here in property status. It means that in this class here, I will have a method, and on this method, I will have the status property. And the initial marking is validation. So when I'm creating the order, the first status that we have is validation. And the places. Well, here in this example, I'm using the PHP const on this YAML file, but the states here can be also in database or any other place, depends on the project. And this is how the transitions are defined. So you can see here, the first step is validation, which goes from the validation to accepted, which is the next status. And then it goes on until it gets failed, accepted, or completed. And so it's just an example on how to use the components inside the class. So here I have the sales order state machine. And in my construct method, I have the workflow interface, like a dependency inversion. And the sales order state machine is my property name for this component. Here I have the Symfony Workflow interface. So if you are interested in know which method I can use or not, we have all these methods here. I have the get marking to get the pointer. Can, it's just a method to check if the transition is enabled or not. It's just a validation. I really suggest to use this method because if you don't use and you try to apply the transition, it will break and you have an error. Like an error on validation, not an exception, not a fatal error, but the Symfony flow will return just a method, an error, call it an exception, saying that you cannot do that because it's not defined. So it's not enabled to do that. So we have the build transition blocked list to check if the transition is blocked or not, to get all the blocked list. The apply, which is the main method, to apply as a status for a new state. The get enable transitions to get all the actions that you can do to change the state. The get name to get the name of the state, the definition, the marking store, and the metadata store. On the use case, I'm using just these two methods, which is the can method here and the apply method, which are the main methods for the Symfony workflow. The can method is just to check if I can make the transition to a new place, to that new place, if it's defined. And the apply is to really change the status of the component. But one of the main questions on the community since the component was created, how can I use that with a DDD structure? So this was the application structure. So here we have these folders, like admin, application, domain, and one of the main roles for the DDD is that it requires that you isolate your domain layer, because the domain layer is the manifestation of the domain model and all the directly related design elements, all the business, all the logic. So it's ideal to have this domain layer isolated. So that's why I just put this meme here. So keep my domain name out of your mouth. And this suggestion, there is a new article from Tobias Nyholm, that one of the main creators on the Symfony Workflow Component, and where he explains how to do that. But basically, it's based on the CVC factory. So if you can check here, I'm creating a new class, the new one that can get same example from the sales orders, which implemented the aggregator root interface and the loggable entity interface. But here I'm starting to use my factory. So we have a get workflow definition, which is a start function. So the definition builder, which is a class from the Symfony Workflow, and this return it has a method called add places. And inside this method, I can define my transitions. So this function here is located on my entity, so on my domain. So I not like putting the logic separated. So as I have to isolate my domain, I can put my logic for transitions and change the status also inside the domain layer. And this is the state factory machine, the state machine factory, sorry. One of the arguments is to have to event dispatcher. And here we have the definition on the class that it's running. So Symfony Component workflow state machine. And the factory has the creating method. And we have these arguments, the sales order entity or domain, and the get workflow definition. And last but not least, a Symfony Workflow Component would not be a workflow component if you cannot generate some graphs automatically. And this is the magic. It's possible to generate a visual representation of the workflow in SVG or PNG images using some third-party components which you can choose. So we have the GraphViz, we have the Mermaid CLI, which is based on JavaScript, and we have the Plant UML. All of these components are that kind of components that you can generate graphs by coding. So if you check the Mermaid, for example, by one side, you have a lot of code there, and based on this code, you to generate a diagram, basically a UML diagram. And Symfony is using this under the hood to create a new diagram based on the workflow definition. And to do that, you just need to use this command here, the workflow dump sales order, for example, which is the name of my workflow. And the type dot PNG, which is the format, and the name, which is graph PNG. And this is the result. So based on all that definitions that I showed to you on my IMO file, I have this result. So you can check here, like the initial one is validation, go to accepted, then processing, failed, concealed, all the states here. But from the Symfony 6.4 version, it's also possible to use some metadata tags to style the workflow graphs. Because, well, if you get the workflow like this, it's interesting, but well, it not have colors. You can have more things here. So for places, we have a new property called the BG color or background color. And here we have a color. Description, it's a new attribute when you have a string that describes the state. And for transitions, you have label, which is a string to replace the name of the transition, the color, and the arrow color as well. You can define that. So for example, if I get the IAML configuration file, here I have a new workflow for a review process. And this review process has a pull request, which is a state machine. And inside of the review step here, I have a metadata attribute. Inside this metadata attribute, I have the description called human view. And also enclosed, I have a new background color for deep sky blue. Also for other states here, like updates, I have a new metadata for the arrow color turquoise, wait for review as orange, accept as with a new label called accept PR. And this is the result. So now you can paint and you can color all the attributes there. So it starts is green, the area is red. So you can define the colors for arrows, for for the places. And you also can describe put some description here, like review. I have the human review, for example. And well, this is open for what you would like to transcribe. And well, basically, is this. Thank you very much.